Hi, everyone. This is September 18th, Wednesday. This is the K8s Infra working group session, trying to catch up just after we started the ship of 116. So yay. So Christoph, would you like to run the meeting, please? Technical difficulties still, Christoph. Hola.
Christoph, it says you're dialed in on your phone and you're muted.
Christoph?
Those fancy earbuds he has.
Okay, while Christoph is getting in, let me share my screen. Okay. And quickly go through, see what was there from before. So the good news from last week was Catherine's proposal got merged, and we were able to get it going. So yay! Thanks, Catherine, and everybody else who helped Catherine out.
So we're actually looking at if we can even streamline it one step further and maybe cut prow out of the equation, so there'll be even one less thing to do. So Catherine's exploring that now.
Is anyone here?
Hello.
I'm here. Can you hear me? Sorry, it's the room is detecting if I'm here or not.
Ah, okay. Okay, nice. So what would be the alternative that Catherine is looking at? How to?
We're going to see if we can hook through automation, so without human interaction, GitHub directly up to GCB without prow being the thing in between.
What do you use in between? GitHub Actions?
GitHub, there's a GCB app for GitHub.
GCB app for GitHub.
Okay. And there's like 2 or 3 different ways you can actually hook it up, whether it's through GitHub webhooks or GitHub Actions or this GCB app. So we're looking at to see if we can cut the need for prow out, and if we can, how does that affect the user experience here with respect to logs and GitHub visibility and those sorts of things?
Right. Okay.
No commitment yet. Right now what we have works, but we're seeing if we can streamline it one step further.
Sure. Yeah, please, we would like to walk through what it's going to look like before we go for it, right?
Of course. Catherine's going to explore a little bit, and then we'll report back.
Okay. Then what was the other one? So let me check one more time. Christoph, are you ready?
Yes, I can actually hear now.
Okay, good. Do you want to take us through the rest of the things that for today?
Sure. Okay, so first item on the agenda, I don't think we did the billing review last meeting, so I think it's this meeting's turn to do the billing review. I know we have Tim on, but I'm not sure if we have Justin.
I don't think Justin's here. I haven't seen him. And he was in the building earlier this week, but I haven't seen him since. So, and I don't see him on the list here. So I didn't look at his billing report, but I can report back on our billing, which maps, actually he sent us a separate email saying that his billing report picked up the new usage that I was playing with. So that's a good thing. I'm looking at a whopping total for the last, sorry, we need to update dates. how about from, what is it, September 18? So we'll call it 8/18 to, I loaded save dates, sorry. All right. I'm looking at $467, the big uptick being the test clusters that I've been spinning up and down as I was learning Terraform.
Great.
DNS
Well, it's
is
good that at least those things are being picked up by the reports as well.
sorry, I'm looking at the Cloud Console dashboard, not the report. I don't have the report in front of me. I was hoping Justin would be here. I can find that though and cross-check it, or I can just cross-check with him offline. But the last 5 times we've cross-checked, it's been within pennies once we figured out why my view was wrong. So I'm pretty confident in it at this point. I'm looking just real quickly at the numbers, and there's nothing that is surprising to me. DNS is at about $50, 130 million queries. And the rest is VMs that were backing clusters.
Great.
Oh, sorry, there's one interesting line item. $7, download worldwide destinations. So I wonder if that's the cluster API stuff. It's hard to tell. It doesn't break it down further yet. So we now at least have one datum where we can start to dig into it and see if we can break down further.
Cool. Looking over our action items from last meeting, the big one was Terraform and getting it spun up in production. I know I can report that we've made significant progress and we have what we believe to be the final configuration checked into the repo. Are you comfortable with like getting that, pushing the buttons, getting that up and running this morning, Tim?
Yeah, so I was all set to do that. I was really hoping that I'd be able to say I ported over the publisher bot, but it looks like Google has changed our internal auth mechanism to force me to re-auth more often, and that has broken Terraform. So, and of course I got opted into it 2 days ago. So I've filed myself an opt-out ticket, and hopefully I'll be able to do that later today.
Okay, great.
But yes, we're locked and loaded. Everything's merged. I don't have any pending PRs. I don't have anything that I want to change about it. I want to turn it on, and I want to port the workloads that are currently running in the other clusters into this new cluster, and I want to burn down the cluster turnup project.
Great. Any questions or concerns from anyone? Kind of a last call. Cool. Then let's move forward with that today. Just looking to see if there's anything else from last meeting that was in particular that we wanted to follow up on. I don't think so. So moving into open discussion, we've got the first item here on the mass image migration from Linus.
Yeah, so this will happen, I think, in the next weeks, certainly not months. I think it should be done probably around the early October timeframe, because I don't really know all the hurdles because there are thousands of images in the old prod. I just did a test for a subset of those images, and it turns out that the promoter cannot currently handle Docker schema 1 images because I've been using the Go Container Registry library. This is pretty technical, but anyway, I talked to that maintainer who is another Googler, and he will expose the library so that it's more usable for more cases. So that'll happen this week. But the gist of it is that we want to copy all the images from the existing, I call it legacy prod Google containers, to the new one that Tim set up a while ago, K8s Artifacts prod. That's the one that we've been promoting the new like staging sub projects images to. So I imagine that this will basically, like at the end of it, we'll have a single like manifest for like yet another folder in that directory of next to all the other staging repos. We'll kind of treat the old prod as another staging repo in a sense. And so like the promoter will check that and just make sure that it just stays current, I guess. After the initial migration is done though, like it's not gonna be that exciting because nobody will ever update that manifest, but that's the way I see it happening, because I think it would be nice to at least have a record of what exists there, like officially, going forward, just so that we know, okay, you know, these images were copied in from the old one. They are technically legacy. So that's gonna happen soon. I'm currently working on disaster recovery like scripts. This is kind of related. That's disaster recovery is somewhat related because this image migration is going to use a promoter as another tool like in it. So I'm thinking of using the promoter for disaster recovery as well. The key is that currently, to my understanding, the promoter is the only tool that I know of that creates a snapshot of all images, like in a YAML format. Like every single image by digest, you know, with the tags associated with it. So that's why I'm kind of bringing in that tool for these processes that I'm trying to introduce. So that is what I'm working on. I do have a design doc internally, might share that, but I don't really know how transparent we want this to be. Other than that, this will happen soon. Are there any questions?
Did we have an agreed on DR plan? I forget if I read and reviewed that or if I haven't seen it yet.
You haven't really seen any implementation details on it yet. I mean, there's been some emails between you and me, but I haven't written like a design doc for it or anything.
Okay.
Should I?
I mean, yes, it needs to be documented for community ownership,
Okay.
and it needs to be completely transparent. So yeah, we should probably document it. Whether that's just like a README in the repo or something, it is up to you to figure out what the scope is.
Sure. Yeah. So just to recap. So there are two things. One is disaster recovery. That is basically a backup solution, for the new prod like registry. So after, it's all done, we have all these images migrated over, there's new images coming in, and like, we just want to have some process that backs it up, because we don't have that currently for Google containers. So we're trying to make it less
terrifying,
less scary. Yeah, thank you.
And we're just looking at backing up things that get promoted, right? So like the thing that is the prod bucket, that's what we're looking at backing up, as opposed to backing up all the staging repos.
Correct.
Right. Let's not use the word bucket, because we cannot back up buckets because details, but yeah.
I mean,
good point. Yes.
To be totally transparent, right? We asked the GCR team what we can assume about the underlying GCS buckets, and they said don't.
Yeah.
It's an implementation detail that they reserve the right to change.
Okay. So just taking a step back to the legacy piece. So just for my own edification, the process that we're looking at doing is taking a copy, basically like using using the promoter script as it is, to take a copy of things that are currently in Google containers, putting it into a legacy prod bucket that will become like a staging bucket, and then using the actual promoter to promote those into our actual prod, or like our new production bucket, ahead of cutting over DNS to point to new registry.
So you added an element there that I didn't actually think of, which is the new like staging legacy subproject bucket, or GCR. I was thinking of just treating Google Containers itself as the staging legacy GCR, and then promoting from that directly to the new one. Like, I don't think, does it matter? I mean,
Yeah, no, I was thinking along the same lines as you, Linus. I don't think there's any reason to move it to a new staging bucket unless community, I mean, I guess the reason is community ownership. I'm not sure that it's worth the effort, considering that for most staging repos, we expect them to age out anyway. So they're more vestigial than anything. Once they're
I
moved
think
to
given
Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I think given there's so much usage of these URLs effectively, it could be argued to represent API. So if you don't do what Linus is saying, you're still going to have to duplicate and go through a deprecation cycle, I would think, for the old ones, because so many things reference those. So just leaving them in place means you don't have to worry about that. So.
Exactly. So leaving them in place means we can, like, if there's anybody who is using the sort of naked URL, not the vanity URL, then they won't break. We can leave that there for a year or whatever, right? Like, we expect the traffic to almost immediately die off because the most traffic is going through the vanity URL. And so I think it's simplest to just leave it there and then schedule an action item for a year from now to decommission that bucket entirely, because that is now the staging bucket. It's not the vanity URL. It's not anything. And hopefully that's it.
Hi, question. So do we have scripts for automating the creation of this new production repository already? Is it going to be any different from what we already have?
No, it's the same as the new one.
Okay.
We'll just treat the old Google Containers bucket, which is the naked bucket, as if it was a staging repo, right? We'll just tell the promoter this is the source and the destination is the same as all the other prod buckets.
I understand that part. I'm asking about the creation of a new GCR repository for use as production. Do we already reuse?
No, there's no new repository.
I guess we are using the word bucket to mean GCR.
Yes, sorry.
So now that piece of information, I think, kind of clarifies it for me. So let me try to explain what's happening again. So we have, like, all of our current stuff is in Google Containers, and k8s.gcr.io is a vanity URL that points directly at Google Containers. So whatever's in Google Containers gets served by k8s.gcr.io. What we're going to do now is configure all the manifests, like the specific SHAs of the images that are currently tagged in Google Containers. And we're going to use the promoter script to basically promote them from Google Containers. So there's a copy of that particular SHA in the GCR registry for K8s Artifacts prod, which is the new prod registry. Once we have all of that stuff promoted, then we can start testing that particular registry, make sure it works the way we want, and then schedule the cutover of the vanity URL to the new one, which will then allow promotion not only from Google Containers, but if we want to move the process for any of those Google Containers images, like, qcross, over to a proper staging bucket, we would just then change the hash in the promoter script. It would just consume it as a different source.
So slight nuance. We're making most of the new, most or all of the new stagings promote into subdirectories of the prod. Is that right, Linus?
Yeah. Or
so
you call
in the root directory, any images that are not in a subdirectory will automatically be the legacy images. And all of the new images, so like Google Cross, or not Google Cross, Crossbuild or whatever it's called, I forget, will be in a subdirectory called cross with a label. And so it'll be very clear which ones are sort of the legacy images and which ones are the new images. And the legacy staging and the new staging won't overlap. Does that make sense?
But it does. But what if we want to take over those images? Like I can foresee us wanting to, like, a personal goal of mine would be to get KubeCross so that it's done through this GCB process. I would love that.
Yeah, and that would be all new.
But that would require a new staging bucket because we wouldn't be able to push into Google containers.
Correct. And
we don't necessarily want to change the location of where KubeCross is.
I'm saying we would actually change the ultimate URL so that it would include a subdirectory in the middle. Is that a problem? I hope that it would make everything cleaner and simpler in the long term while still leaving the old in place. But it would be a user visible change, like the evolution. Like if version 1 was in the root directory, version 2 would be in a subdirectory.
I don't like that. I don't necessarily think that we should be forced to change the location of an image as far as like directories and subdirectories and that kind of stuff, just to change how we're building it. I think that's an unnecessary restriction.
So the restriction was Linus, stop me if I'm stepping on you. The restriction was mostly there because there's no good way to detect conflicts between promoter manifests without a human actually saying, oh, don't use that name because somebody else is using that name. Whereas if we put everything in a subdirectory, we can say, well, your subdirectory corresponds to your staging, so therefore you're by definition clean.
Can I make a different suggestion? I don't know how much work this would be to change it, but if we said that every staging repo was a directory, that's step 1, but then have a flag in the promoter that says like, oh, this should be like root, like this should be a root image, that then drops it to the root as opposed to the subdirectory, or both. That it goes to both in the directory and the root, because then you would only need to check for conflicts in the image name and tag for things that had like root equals true.
So this is getting a little bit too into the details of the implementation, but basically if you still want to promote to the root directory, as we're calling it, you can still do that. You just need a separate manifest for it. So there's nothing like stopping us from creating a new manifest that says, this is like a legacy or a root only, image manifest. Any image in here will land in the, root. Like that's already doable today. Just we don't have that model, or we don't have that practice set in place yet. Because currently we have, subfolders named after each staging subproject. Under that is like slash and then manifest that YAML. So that's been like the pattern so far. What you're basically saying is, okay, we'll introduce another manifest that YAML that just says the destination is at the root. It's doable, but yeah, I mean, I haven't really discussed this idea.
Maybe we should take the conversation to Slack or email or even GitHub I don't want to derail the entire conversation. We're halfway through the meeting today.
So I agree. So we can stop going down this route, but I do have one question. The vanity URL does support the, directory / image construct, right? So, okay.
Yeah.
We don't have to make any changes there.
Right. And the benefit of the vanity URL is that it auto regionalizes. So Asia users go to the Asia mirror and US users go to the US mirror, et cetera.
Perfect. Thank you.
So Christoph, maybe we can carry this forward on Slack later today.
Yeah, I will. Well, I'll take point as far as I want to go and review kind of what we have as far as the manifest code today, so I have a better understanding there, and then maybe I can lead kind of poking this issue to kind of get us toward a resolution.
Got you. I'll link something in Slack in the chat.
So that's all we've got on the open discussion. I'll put out a kind of last call. Is there anything else that anyone in particular wants to discuss? The other thing that we could go through, if we have some time, is to go through our milestone, if we have no more particular open things to discuss.
Yeah, I have one thing. I do have a pending PR that I need to update for the email support. I just wanted to give a little bit of history there for the PR itself. So the existing G Suite mailing email lists, right? I wanted to preserve the metadata exactly as is. So that was number one. The number two was some of them, you know, are open to subscription. So I don't want those the behavior of those to change. So I added code to make sure that if they are open to a subscription and we have documentation saying, please subscribe to this Google group, then I don't want to mess with the members of that Google group using the automation that we have. And we also have to keep the existing Google groups that we are using for ACL, you know, has to be backed by the groups.yaml. So there is this conflicting stuff. So there is some code in there for dealing with those two different scenarios. I do have. I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to update the PR before this call. I'll try to do it this week. You know, stuck with some release stuff.
So sounds good, Dims. Go ahead, Tim.
No, please go.
I was just going to mention that, like, yeah, that had been on my review backload, and then I got swamped down with things that were release pending. So yeah, what I could do as well is I'll go through it like from a very high level and be like, hey, these are like design blocking things or things that we need to rework or change if there are any, before you go and take the time to go and update it. But yeah, I'd like to see that push forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I was confused whether the intention was to run this periodically to keep the GitHub in sync, or just to know that it's going to be incorrect because subscriptions are not handled through GitHub, or whether to sort of go hybrid and say all owners have to be listed in GitHub, but other members can be added manually, or something else.
Right. So the intention here was if we wanted to periodically check, there is a way to do it, but the current existing use cases, one for subscription and one for ACL, should remain as is. The workflow should not change for those two things. We should still be able to update ACLs by making changes to groups.yaml. And also, if we decide for, you know, if the mailing list metadata need to change, we'll, whether it is a subscription based or ACL based, either way, we should be able to do it using the automation. So that was the intention there.
I'm still not sure I understand. Like, if I have a group that I run this script and I see that the group has 25 members today, and we commit that to GitHub, and then tomorrow the 26th member gets added, like, what use is that list of 25 members in GitHub? It's actually wrong.
Yeah, I don't want to check in the generated one. So for subscription-based lists, I always expect the groups.yaml to be empty for that subscription-based list. that was
How is that being detected?
I don't detect it right now. I just print out everybody.
That's the part that I was missing then.
Correct. Yes.
Well, there's a flag as far as the list metadata that we could probably check, isn't there, Dims?
Yeah, we can do that. Yes, but right now, well, the other use case that I was thinking about was like if you want to see the growth of how popular one of the mailing list is, then we can run it every few months to see if there's more people, less people, that kind of stuff. But that's not like a primary thing right now for us.
Yeah, I agree. The tooling is nice. I don't want something checked into GitHub that we know is instantly wrong, right?
That's correct. For the subscription-based list, I will prune before I update the groups.yaml. That's what I've been doing.
Thank you. And also, I think I had a question about the security groups group. The group exists, but it wasn't listed in that list.
Yeah, I have to go figure out why I'm not getting it through the API. I don't know if I don't have enough permissions or something is off. So I have to log in through the UI and see whether I can see the group using the UI and see if it's just a question of the API I'm not able to see it.
Okay, cool. Let me know if there's more I can do to help there. Clearly, the group does exist because I'm allowed to turn clusters up with it. In fact, you made me go and like try to turn up a cluster listing the security group as a known bad name, and it did come back and you say, hey, this group doesn't exist, but it allowed the K8s or GKE security groups. So,
Okay.
Clearly, the group does exist, and
Okay.
GKE is validating against it, but I can't see it in whatever the tool is producing. So, good
Okay.
luck.
So, thank you. I'll try.
Happy hunting. Okay, so actions for next time. I intend to have the prod cluster up and the publisher bot switched over to it. If somebody's familiar with the publisher bot, I would love a volunteer to help, or I can just try to figure it out from the YAML and whatnot. Then we can identify a candidate list of what the next few targets are going to be, moving from the legacy utility cluster into this new cluster, converting over the ingresses and IPs and DNS and those sorts of things. And then we are on our way.
So you said you needed a volunteer. Has Amy been active, Linus, in the image promotion stuff?
Which Amy?
Amy? Oh, Amy. No.
Yeah. No. Okay. I'll go ping to see if she wants to get back to it.
Yeah, I mean, I can do the publisher bot conversion, but the big goal of being able to move this all into community hands is to get small groups of people who volunteer to own individual bits of infrastructure. So if somebody's volunteering for it, I'd be happy to shoulder surf while they do it instead of me, but I'll do it if I have to.
I can help if you want, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Bart. I will. I'll ping you as soon as that cluster is up and ready, and we can work out a time.
Thanks,
Sure,
Bart.
perfect.
I also see our thanks.
So that's it for the stuff that was on the agenda. I looked at our milestone, and our milestone, much of the the ready to migrate milestone specifically is we need a cluster. So I think it'll be way more useful to go over that and spend some time churning through that milestone next meeting once we have a cluster up and have validated at least one workload in it, because then we can triage the work of migrating things into it. Any concerns or objections to just waiting for next meeting for that one? Okay. Then I'll make this the last call if there's anything else anyone wants to bring up now. Otherwise, we can have 20 more minutes back in our day.
Or we can argue about subdirectories.
Or we can argue about subdirectories.
Oh,
Subdirectories. Yes.
Okay. I linked in the chat to one of the manifest YAMLs for the build image. In fact, Christoph, since you picked on the build image example, you can see, there we go, this link. You can see in there, if anybody clicks the link, in the registries block, there's the one that says source true. That is the staging. And then the 3 destinations are the 3 regional mirrors. And they specifically have the /build image subdirectory suffix. So the final resulting, the naked resulting image name would be us.gcr.io/Kate's artifacts prod /build image/build image : tag. And I argued for that because I can be confident that any manifest that, or any image from this manifest is going to be in this subdirectory, and therefore I don't need to conflict detect it against any other image. If we think that this is really a bad thing for usability, sorry, let me add, the decorated, the vanity URL would be kates.gcr.io/build image/build image : tag. And thank you for driving the screen. Which I don't find particularly egregious. It is different than what people are doing today. And
it impacts discoverability because you can't just like pull down and say, hey, dump me all the tags for this image because the image is actually moving. So like the image itself, when you go to like kates.gcr.io/cubecross, it will like stop on whatever today's tag is and will just never update with a new tag because actually it's a different image location as far as like Docker v2 is concerned.
yes, so we would have to, if we want to if we have any processes that automatically look at tags and try to pull the latest tag, which I might argue is a bad idea, there's the reason we don't use the latest tag, they would have to be updated to get the new name with the subdirectory built into it. If we want to special case a couple of things, I guess I'm okay with that. I don't want to special case all of them because they're like, it's a mess right now and you can't, like when you look at the listing of it, there are thousands of images there. Nobody can find anything. So having them at least lumped by which staging they came from gives you a clue as to who owns it and who's responsible for it. That's my thinking anyway. Argue with me.
So these manifest files, they basically dump the contents of an entire registry. So like all images and all tags.
Yes, this, as time goes on, this manifest file will have a listing of all of these SHAs and tags for everything that has been promoted from this staging into prod.
And that'll be in the images array that is not currently populated?
Correct. This is a, for that example, this is a bad example. If you pop up 2 directories and look at the cluster API, Kate staging cluster API, manifest YAML.
Yeah.
You can see in there a real example where they're actually using it.
Okay.
So for each image name, there's a mapping of SHA to tags, plural.
Right. So we're as far as duplicate detection, we are not doing any duplicate detection as far as the folder is concerned. Are we doing any as far as the image name?
So the design of the manifest itself prevents that from happening because the images is well, it would be nice if you go to the actual example with that images array populated.
I
But
don't know who's
um,
driving the screen.
if you go
One sec. I can drive the screen. One sec.
okay.
Dim's, can I steal the screen from you?
We're watching the do it. Yeah.
I appreciate your memeing.
Live memeing.
Yeah. Share. There we go.
Got it up here too if you want.
Share this one.
Yes.
Hidden screen.
Right. So, well, I guess, yeah, now that I think about it, well, the duplicate detection for image names, I guess I think I do that already though. It should check for consistency. So if you have two items in the images array that both have name equals foo, it should just error out and say, no, like this is not good, fix it.
Right.
And you would see that in
Okay.
the pull request to make this change, because it would try to do a dry run of it and say, oh, duplicate name detected or whatever. And then as far as the other stuff like the D map, it's short for digest map, but all the SHA like entries, I mean, those are keys. So by definition, YAML will complain if you try to have multiple duplicate digests entries. And then the last part, I guess, is the tag array. I think I also complain if there's multiple items with the same tag like item in a tag array.
Right. Right. Which and that would make sense that we would need to do those extra checks to make sure that like within the images array that like each name, like each object in there has a unique name as far as the images array is concerned, and that the tag array has like you don't have two different digests that are pointing towards the same tag.
I'm pretty sure I do those checks. I mean, I'll have to look up the source code again, but yeah, I mean, I tried to add as many checks as I could when I first wrote the implementation. But just to go back or loop back into what Tim was saying, so the whole idea of having this broken up, like in the end, we could have had one manifest file with all the images in the world, but we decided that was not a good idea because now everybody has access to write to everybody else's image potentially. So we're like, okay, well, why not just give each subproject their own manifest, and you can do whatever you want there. You can give access to your staging repo to the select few people that you trust. Now you don't have this issue of like, okay, I'm going to create an image in a PR, and I'm going to write an image that I don't really maintain or something, right? If you have like one root directory with 30 images, let's just say, and I make a PR to two of them, like how do you know that I'm not adding a new image for foo and bar and all these other ones? So a human would have to check. We do that, but then it's like one less piece of automation, I guess, that we could automate if we just use subfolders for everything. So that was the main.
So then the proposed solution, like right now, what the idea was, is to have another one of these manifest files with the source here being Google containers.
Right.
The destination being these GCR repos. I'm trying not to use buckets. These GCR repos, but without the trailing folder name.
Right.
And then this images list would be a large, ungodly size list of every image in Google containers, every tag in Google containers.
2.2 megabytes.
That exist today.
Yes.
Or we could just special case, like if it was just important for the build stuff, right? We could have either a separate staging or manifest2.yaml, if the promoter tool knew to look for it, that had no subdirectory specified at the end of the registry names, right? And just call it like a one-off special case. I will push back hard against doing that for more than a single-digit number of special cases.
I'd be interested to look through, like, what that large ungodly list looks like, and to try and pick out like which ones are important there. Because like the thing when we moved from like Google containers to the vanity URL, like making that, like that's the last time we did like a big move of like a whole bunch of images and stuff. When we did that move, we were maintaining the entire back history of tags and such. So you could interchangeably use Google containers or K8s.gcr.io, and you'd still have both the entire history going forward and going backwards. I'm just resistant to the idea of locking us in and telling like anybody who has a current image in Google containers, like, you are no longer allowed to update this image. You need to move its location. You need to change your code to look at a completely different location, and that location will not have your back history.
I mean, that last part, I mean, if you really wanted to, you could say, oh, well, you know, let's say for foo, image foo, you know, you could just create a new staging repo and say, okay, well, we're going to backfill all the old existing foo images there. So if you look at the new location, at least you'll have the whole history moving forward. But like, that hasn't been brought up as an idea. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to see the list, go to gcr.io/Google containers, Google_Google-containers, and you can see the list. We could go through every single image and figure out which staging should it go to, and then move things around so that it appears as if it came from that staging, and then we retain the back history, but the name is still different. I'm not sure that that's worth the effort, or I'm not sure that it's less effort than the alternative.
Right.
I mean, there's just a lot of stuff there because it really wasn't very well controlled early on.
Come on. Click in.
There's 480
No,
things there.
How many was that?
480.
Okay, so not so bad. Once you dig into each one, then there are many sub tags, so we'd have to list out all the separate hashes. But you're right, 480 is not egregious, but it is still a lot of toil.
A portion of that is split across the architecture, so I mean, there's maybe only 100-ish or so unique things to think about.
Only 100.
Well, it's figuring out which things are which of those are still active, right? Because like things that are inactive, by definition, I don't care about, because as long as we maintain the back history, which we are going to maintain the back history, that's no problem. It's things that we expect are actively used and we expect will get updated at some point in the future. That's where it gets tricky.
So are you more concerned? So there's really two avenues here. There's one which is the non-tag portion of the name, the first half or first 90% changes if you add the subdirectory. And then there's the history of all the tags given that same prefix. If we were to promote all of these into the individual subdirectories, we still change the prefix, but you at least have the history of tags. Versus, I don't want to change the prefix at all for new tags. You see how those are really opposite from each other. Which one do you think is more pressing?
Without going through the list, I feel like it's hard to know. I think that both are problems from a usability standpoint. Like, because if I know that I have like stuff referencing like, there's both the there's both the machine factor and the human factor. If we like change the prefix at all, if we change any part of it, whether it's the prefix or the tag or anything, we know we need to like update a location to use a new image, because we're not in any of our, at least our production stuff, we're not using like latest or something that floats. So we know if we update the tag, we're going to need to update the image location anyway. So from a machine perspective, updating whether it's the tag or the prefix, I guess really doesn't make that much of a difference to the machine. It's more for a human discoverability factor, like when you're like, hey, I want to list all the available tags for this particular prefix. If your prefix changes, that's an issue.
So I totally buy that, and it's a really great consideration that I had not considered before. What if we can simply provide an example and say, like, as you enter this brave new world of staging repos, if you feel like your staging repo should own, or rather, if you're the continuation of an existing image, here's how you can back import the tags for that image into your staging and promote them into your new prod subdir, so that you can get a list of all the images, and we leave it to the individual image owners to decide whether it's worth doing or not, and maybe even encourage them to do it by making it easy. So the prefix would change, but they'd be able to keep the history.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does, as long as like the prefix gets updated, right? So like if you still, like, it depends on where you're getting, like from the human factor here. If we're if you put in the old prefix, you're still going to get the images up to a point, and then it will just be stale.
That's right.
If you put in the new prefix, you will get the images, like both the new ones that we're making and all the old ones.
That's right. That seems like a reasonable compromise to me.
One thing I'd throw out there is that until about a year ago, most of these were made fairly sloppily, and we've been improving that a lot over the last year. So I feel like there's already a transition to where a lot of the, there's some sort of inflection point there prior to which any of that history didn't really matter much from a tag. I can tell you from a deep inspection this summer, most of our artifacts, I couldn't really tell you what was in them very closely, aside from a top level. Like if it's Kubernetes 1.13.11, I know what that is based on GitHub. But the peripheral stuff in the container can be hard. And then some of them weren't even built so closely from a release to where you could map that. You know, like came around this time period from this repo, so it would have been one of these commits-ish. So the history there, like I really appreciate, and like, I mean, I was the one who brought up like, hey, what about deprecation policy, even just on the URLs? But for some portion of this, if you get very far back at all, even like on the order of 3 months for some of these, what's there for history doesn't give the user much anyway.
I imagine, let me argue the Christoph's side of it though. I imagine that there are out there a lot of repos that build up an image name by concatenating strings, and it would be clumsy for them to say, if you're asking for tag less than X, where X is an arbitrary string and not necessarily numerically comparable, if it's less than X, then use this prefix, otherwise use that prefix. And I guess that would be clunky. It would be nice to be able to say, here's the new prefix, and it has the entire history of tags. So if you want to see what it used to be, or if you need to roll back to an older version to do a bisect or something, you can do that. Does that carry any weight?
Yeah, it does. And like, I think I'm kind of coming around to, I think that is a fair compromise. Like it's still not perfect, but I think that may strike the right balance between, you know, our investment into this and how much work we're willing to do to kind of maintain both forward and back and all of that kind of stuff. as well as from an image maintainer's perspective, okay, here's a path. If you want all your old tags and have like one source of truth location, this is your new source of truth location. And there's both a path to like import all your old tags into that location, as well as like publish tags into it going forward.
Right. So we can put out a how-to for folks like the core DNS team who has their own staging, but also has a legacy image that's just in the root, or the Cube build or whatever, those people, and say, here's how you take an old image from the old repository or even from the new root, I guess, and also tag it under your subdirectory. And it's actually a really easy procedure, right? You really just need to copy the SHA into your own manifest and give the tag, the appropriate tag for it. So we can even write a simple tool that just populates that for them. And then they submit that and the promoter will say, oh, well, these SHAs already exist. Let me just tag them.
Does that matter as far as like the source registry bit in the manifest? Like I don't necessarily understand the interaction of the source code with like basically this bit. Does this bit matter if we have something that's already in the prod bucket?
No, you're right. Probably what we want people to do is pull it down and push it up to their staging and then tell the promoter to promote it, which will then detect a no-op because the SHA already exists in the destination. Right, Linus?
GCR says yes.
Okay. So you're right. It's a little bit heavier than just adding the SHA. They would have to Docker pull and Docker push to their staging, but only one time.
Is there a way to get around that? Because I don't like that, especially with like a large number of tags. Like I wonder if there's a way to like can we have two registries in the registries bit that both have source true and like have one be their staging bucket and one be Google containers? Does that work? Or is there like another way for us to like tag a specific SHA as like, hey, this is legacy coming from Google containers?
So that's okay. I think we're out of time, but what you just said about having multiple sources of for the images, that is not currently a feature, but that could be a feature. That would make it super easy because then it's now down to the downstream users. It's not really up to us to.
Would that be easier, Linus? Do you think it'd be easier to add it as like two manifest.yamls or just to add it to the existing manifest schema?
I guess two separate manifests would be easier, but then now you get into the trouble of who owns what.
I mean, like,
well, but
what if you could put
two,
two
but in the same directory?
Yeah, what if you could put two in the same directory? Like there was manifest YAML and manifest legacy.yaml, and both were understood by the promoter.
Yeah, as long as they don't step on each other's toes, then it should be fine. What I mean is like as long as they don't, promote to the same like destination, right, or the same like image name and destination.
Right.
That seems like it makes that protection a little bit more difficult if we have like, because they would have maybe a manifest legacy that would then never change, because that would just be like one time your tags go in here, this is the stuff that's pulling from Google containers.
Exactly.
But as long as manifest.yaml doesn't also touch the same image name tag combination, like because there will be image name overlap between the two files, but the image name tag combination, you do not want both files touching that same image name tag set.
Right. But at that point, I think we can rely on humans to just do the right thing because it's broken down to a small enough scope that like, hey, cluster API people or Cube build people or core DNS people, just don't screw this up. The legacy one is sort of a one-time thing for keeping history. And honestly, after you do the first commit of the legacy, it should probably never, ever change.
Right. I think that's a fair compromise.
Okay, we are out of time.
Okay. Linus, can you put a little bit of thought into how we might actuate that? And if you have time to sketch it out or we can try to regroup and co-write it or something?
Yeah, I'll put something together. Yeah.
Cool. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the great point.
Sounds great.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good one, everyone. Cheers.